Thank you, Angel. That I jump in, but I'm also responsible for the German PRTR, so I have a lot of experience with it. First of all, thank you that you really restricted the core set to really the very basic identification where the installation is located. So that's, I think, an important point, and it makes things really more useful that this same definition can be also used for other reporting purposes. But what was not totally clear to me from your presentation is what are the linkages between facility, installation, part of installation, because this is sort of a never-ending discussion for people dealing with the licensing and monitoring of industrial sites, and I would be very happy to get some more information on the linkages in your core data model on that. Thank you.
It's true that this is also a discussion that is taking place in the groups, where to fix the limits or how to establish the links between different levels. Because it's true that in the legislation, different parts of the legislation refer to, in a confusing way, to different terminology: facility, installation part. Sometimes it's establishment. So it's not easy. So in a general way, the facility, as is considered, is at the level to describe more closely related to the legal entity that is on charge for this reporting. And the installation should be considered a specific part inside the facility. The installation part is more focused on more local or specific legislation that is dealing with a specific technical apparatus or instrument that are installed inside the facility. But it's true that this is part of the discussion that we are taking.
I must say I'm getting increasingly worried. I'm getting very worried because it seems as if somewhat we are changing the scope of the INSPIRE directive itself. And this is going to have serious consequences. INSPIRE directive is about spatial data, meaning not just the coordinates of a spatial object, basically what is there. Before, Robert explained us about natural risk zones, and now we learn that for industrial facilities, because of reporting requirements in certain areas, certain data, attribute data, linked to the spatial object is not going to be part of the INSPIRE model. Now, when I think about a use case like a flood early warning system or a flood scenario information system, the people that are developing that within the river basin, they will need to know more than just the location of the production facility. They need to know how vulnerable it is. They will need to know what kind of chemicals are stored there or any other attributes linked to this particular site. The purpose of INSPIRE was precisely to support this kind of developments of information systems. And if we only have a spatial reference framework, then I don't see how we are ever going to manage to bring this data together. Perhaps you could explain that, the two of you combined? Or?
Maybe I was not clear enough, but the questions that you pose, what is necessary for the flood management authorities, this you will get from the core natural hazard model. So it is there. What will not be in the core model is those additional really detailed information about the result of the preliminary flood risk assessment, and other really detailed things. But the type of flood, the likelihood of occurrence, what elements are at risk inside, all those information plus the assessment of the damage, this is going to be in the core. The problem is that those assessments are not harmonized, so we will have a nice framework, but unfortunately you will not be able to compare those assessments across countries because, you know, the methodologies are not harmonized. But you will have the framework saying, okay, quantitatively you have to provide the likelihood of occurrence, if you have it. You have to provide the level of vulnerability of the elements that have some value inside the delineation of the hazard. So all those, it's a lot of information that actually will be provided through the core of the natural hazard model.
I would like to come back, if possible, to this slide where, I mean, in the core part we have included those things that are useful to describe facilities in different domains and in different levels. In the green part, the additional or extended, we have included, for example, an option to describe the inputs and outputs that the facility is producing or is consuming. But this is part of this additional extended part in the middle of the discussion. So the core is the description of the facility from the geographical and the classification point of view. And there are other options to extend or to complement the description of these facilities. Okay.
Probably I could also add, I think very crucial is the linkages between the different information domains. From accessing an Inspire object on the map, you need then the pointers to the different areas of information. For example, for accidental prevention, we have the whole framework of the Seveso II directive and all the information, terminology, etc., etc. And I really hope that Inspire will provide then really the transfer to this information domain. And if this could be organized, I think it would be really a very big step forward. But the detailed information from the different domains do not need to be part of the core. The core should provide the means to transfer the public, the authorities, and the other users to the respective thematic domains. Thank you.
Yes, we in France have absolutely the same point of view. We have information systems about PRTR, of course, and I give an help to link IPPC directive installations to PRTR, but it will be an help, as a colleague said, to be able to put installations in Inspire and to keep emissions in their specific information systems. We need to link the things, but we don't need to put everything in one information system. It would be a mistake, I think.
Yeah, we had in EEA a little preparatory discussions in the emission field, and that discussion, I think, showed me the following. Maybe we need to have also a little bit of more communication around the data specifications when it comes to, let's say, the legal side. People are asking what is actually, and it seems to be clear, of course, from Wanda's presentation, from the Inspire legislation, but maybe not to the outside so much. What is really the difference between, let's say, primary legislation, like these emission legislations which we saw, and a horizontal legislation like Inspire? We tend to think, and I think this should be confirmed in some form of communication, we tend to think that the primary legislation always is first, and Inspire, with a horizontal provision, comes extra. Hugo is nodding his head in a way which makes me think that this is probably not correct. What we were learning in this discussion was apparently in the emission areas there are issues because there is horizontal legislation with very different timings, which could not in all cases, Angel, you may confirm or not, could not in all cases be fully picked up now in the TVG discussions. Maybe you had also not the possibility to sit with all these expert groups of the very legislations. There were questions coming, for example, there's a lot of company reporting in that areas. Are companies also obliged to follow here the INSPIRE guidance, not the guidance, the INSPIRE implementation rules, which come out of this? So what I'm encouraging is to in a form of communication, try to be really clear about, from a legal point of view, not from a data model point of view, how the relationship between all these primary legislations, thematic legislations, however you want to call them, and an INSPIRE piece of legislation is.
Well, there are no different categories of directives, one over the other. What we need to ensure is that they are coherent between each other. And that's, of course, the biggest challenge if we look at evolution of legislation. Now, when it comes down to, for example, a piece of legislation which installs the EPRTR as a register with a lot of attributes per facility and so on and so on, now it's clear this is spatial data. And as such, it is covered by INSPIRE, clearly. At the same time, obviously, we are talking here of an operational instrument which is already in place and on which we need to build, which is also laid down in the INSPIRE directive. So the challenge lies more into looking also at other use cases or the various use cases which require data linked to production and facilities. I don't know, for example, how much the current EPRTR registers and information are used in such a, call it a technological risk scenario. Or is it only used as a reporting, right? So those kind of use cases are important as well.
I don't think this answered my question. I wanted to give another example. There seems to be, you didn't mention this, an ETS legislation which is about emission registries and plants, 20, 30,000 plants across Europe. That is an area where geospatial information doesn't have to be provided in terms of coordinates, but the colleagues are saying that could be very interesting to have this information, and one may try to do, let's say, an amendment of the directive in order to achieve that. But for the time being, they are wondering what they should be doing. I mean, if INSPIRE should be covering this type of emissions, then for the time being, it would actually, the INSPIRE legislation, for the time being, that would actually not provide for any proper spatial data. So are they encouraged now to work towards some revision? Is there a push? Is there just an inspiration, just a recommendation? I mean, just one example where things are quite where things are in principle geospatial, but since in the moment in the thematic legislation it's not being precisely mentioned, one could say, well, let's go as we did it in the past and not think about INSPIRE. But here INSPIRE wants to achieve something, so people should maybe be encouraged to revisit this.
Well, there are clearly two aspects of INSPIRE. One is quite clear. We have the scope of the data covered by INSPIRE. The 32 data teams, they are described. And what needs to be done with this data in terms of sharing, which organizations are affected, is also laid down in the directive. Then we have the technical aspect of INSPIRE. So how are we going to organize all that? How are we going to share this data through ICT and other means? And this is where the challenge currently lies. You cannot question whether a particular data set falls under INSPIRE or not. That is laid down in the legislation. What needs to be organized, which can be questioned, is of course, how are we going to organize this data? How are we going to share it? How are we going to do that most efficiently in order to avoid overlaps, redundancies, duplicates of efforts, and so on? We have a waste shipment legislation as well. And currently, those people are also looking at Inspire to monitor, for example, which is now a totally paper-based system in some countries, how permits can be used and fall under Inspire. So there's quite a lot to be done. In earlier discussions with the group, I actually mentioned ships, because ships are actually industrial facilities, and they are covered by legislation. There is the waste directive on board of ships, and there's now also the emission directive for ships. So again, these are spatial objects. Okay, they move, right? But they are industrial facilities. They have data which has an impact on the environment. So from a legal point of view, they are covered by Inspire. Now, how are we going to organize the sharing of the data which is related to this particular directive to help its implementation? This is another matter. Does that clarify more? Because I'm not in my most clarifying day today, I think.
So will the ship people have to follow the model they've been providing?
I think we need also to look at a few other aspects like feasibility and so on. But it's certainly worthwhile to test it out. I actually asked at a certain moment the drafting team to look into this aspect because it's becoming increasingly important. Okay? But let's not, I mean, it's very complicated. We have to start somewhere. Back to Rome. It was a small village in the beginning, and then we will see how we can expand it later on.
I want to put under your consideration, if you, now it's time for lunch, but we have a lot of time in the afternoon for discussion, and I put under your consideration if you want to look at this data model with more detail, because the idea was do not to put a lot on each presentation, keep it 10 to quarter of an hour. And if you want to have more details, what is in and what is not in, I don't know if you realize that on that team there is 3 levels of, let's say, inclusion on the, let's say, data specifications. There is the core model, there are the extensions that are on the technical guidelines, and there are the ones which are on the annex. So just to say, if you want to do under Inspire, this is a proposal of best practice. So if you want us to come back to this team with more detailed information about the data models, we can put it in the afternoon because, I mean, probably it's not here on the key, but it's very easy to go to the office and bring it back. If not, we keep with the program and we'll see other discussions.